Hello guys, how are you? My name is Carlos Lopez de Lara. I work for the Technical Support Department at IHK, and today we're going to show you how to cast your vote for the extension or not of the reward period on the ITN. The voting period has started. We are on epoch 195, so we just started a few minutes ago. And so we are ready to cast our votes. Remember that you will have 3 complete epochs to cast this vote. You will have epochs 195, 196, and 197, and the voting period will end at the beginning of the epoch 198. So please make sure that you submit your votes during this period, otherwise your vote will not be valid. So please take this into consideration. And also remember that for you to be able to participate in this exercise, you will absolutely require the 0.9 version of Jormungandr and the JCLI. If you have versions 1.8, 18 or 19, those won't work with this. So please make sure that before you try to submit your vote, you update your node. So this is very, very important information. You can go to Jormungandr releases, or you can use your app. In any case, you will need 0.9.0 at least to be able to participate in this exercise, okay? So to participate in this exercise, you will also need some information about the protocol, about the blockchain parameters. In particular, we are interested on the fees. Since to vote, we must create a certificate and submit that certificate through a transaction, we need to know the fees that we need to pay, and this is what we need from the blockchain. Then you need also, of course, your private key of the account that you have associated to your stake pool. This is the account that you use to create your stake pool. And you will also need the public key of that private key associated to that private key, and of course you will need the address. That will be the address that you used to create your stake pool as well. Okay, so please make sure you have those 3 files or those 3 pieces of information. And you will also need this vote plan ID, the index, and the options, which we have here in this very file. So let's start by the beginning, and let me assume that you don't know the protocol parameters. So let me go here and just query the blockchain. And as you can see here, if you go with JCLI RESV0 settings get, you get the protocol parameters, and this is what we are interested on. Okay, so you can have it with this command settings get. And you must have at this moment your secret key. If you've created this secret key following the tutorials we had at the beginning of the ITN, you will probably have it stored in a file called owner PRV, but it can actually have any name you gave it at the beginning. The main point here is that it must be the secret key, right? So how to identify that it is your secret key? Because it starts with this pattern, ED 519, sorry, and then SK is starting for secret key, and then the rest of the key, okay? So this is how you identify your secret key. You will also need, we will need to create our public key from that if you don't already have it, which you probably do have it, but in case you don't, just remember that you can use key to public to produce this public key. And from there, we are going to need, of course, the address, because we need the address that actually holds the funds, okay? So let me just generate the address. In this case, I am using, as you can see here, cat command to retrieve the to pass the public key as an argument to the parameter. So to the command, I mean, and so you can also use your actual string of the public key, but it's simpler. And for that, I would simply recommend that you use the file names that we are using in these tutorials, because this way you can simply follow it just as it is without having to edit too much. And note that I am using the ---- prefix, -- prefix address, just because this is what we did at the beginning of the ITN, but it's not actually necessary. If you have your address with a different prefix or without any prefix at all, it will work as long as it is a valid address. In this case, I am saving the address in the owner.addr file. So as you can see, let me just cut my address so that you can see how it looks. And there it goes. So I have my files and I have my address. So I have almost everything I need. The only thing I'm missing is the vote plan data, which we have in this article. The vote plan ID is located here. You must use this vote plan ID. Then you will need the index, which in this case will be 0. So just take a note of this. And you have 3 choices. You have 3 options to choose from. So if you want to submit a blank vote, you will create a certificate with a 0 as for blank vote. If you are for the yes, for continuing the rewards period, for extending the rewards period, you would create a certificate with a 1 on it. And if you are for the no, you will create a certificate with a 2 on that. Okay, so let me just continue here, and let's just let me fetch my account to get my account data so that we can have the counter and the value, because we need the counter to create the transaction, and we need the value just to make sure that we have sufficient funds on it to actually pay for the transaction fees. Okay, so in this case, this particular address has very little funds, but those will be enough to actually pay for the transaction fees, right? So now that we are here, let us start creating our certificate. And this is perhaps one of the most interesting parts of the entire process, because you are to create the certificate with these parameters: JCLI certificate, new, vote cast, and the parameters are vote plan ID, which comes from here. This is the plan ID, so this is what you will use to replace this parameter. We have index, and index goes 0, and then your choice, your decision here. Remember, 0 blank vote equal 1 equals yes, 2 equals no. So I have my transaction here. I have my command to create the certificate here. I always keep a notepad by the side so that I can simply customize my commands when I need it. So in this case, I'm going for the yes. So I can simply come here and copy and paste it here. So we are going to create this certificate. The certificate has been created. Now we need to prepare a transaction. By creating the certificate, we actually create this certificate, votecast.certificate. And we are now going to include that certificate in a transaction. So we need to prepare the transaction, then finalize it, add the witnesses, and seal and submit the transaction as any other transaction that you have done using the CLI in Jormungandr. Okay, so let's prepare the transaction for this. And first we do JCLI transaction new, and just for creating a new transaction, it's an empty one right now. Then we need to add the account to this transaction. This is where the funds come from. Remember, in this case, we have to add the amount that this transaction will include. So this comes from adding all the fees that we will need to pay. This accounts for 310,000 Lovelas. So it's actually pretty cheap, a third of an ADA. And with that, we will be ready to add this account to our transaction. Then the next thing we have to do is to add the certificate to our transaction. And remember that we created, in the first step, we created this file, vote lower dash casts.certificate. So we are using that particular file to add it. We are reading that file to add that certificate to the transaction. So it's very straightforward. Then let me just finalize this transaction. We need to specify all the fees, but this time not like all accumulated, but one by one. Then we need to add the witness to the transaction. First we add data, then we make the witness, and then we finally add the witness to the transaction. There we go. So we are ready to seal the transaction. This is done with JCLI transaction seal. And just before we submit the transaction, let us query the details of our transaction so that we can make sure that everything is fine. So there are the details of this transaction, and if you are okay with the output, then you are ready to add the transaction to a message. It will create the vote cast fragment, and from here we will be ready to actually submit the transaction to the blockchain. And as you can see, it has already succeeded. Let me just query my address again so that I can make sure that it has passed through and that everything went well. Let me just query this again. So yeah, after a few seconds, it is already in a block and the vote has been registered. Okay. So this is it. It's very simple, very straightforward. Remember that a very important thing here, when you are making the witness, you will need the counter of your transaction. So in this case, you will need to update this particular number to your actual counter of your own address. And from that, it should be very straightforward. So welcome, and let's see what the community decides on this. Congratulations, and let us know if there are any comments, any questions. Please use Zendesk to provide any questions, and we will respond as fast as we can. Thank you.